Hi, welcome to Constitutional Chats, hosted by me, Janine Turner,
and Cathy Gillespie,
with students
Dakari Chapman
and me, Tova Kaplan.
Join us as we discuss hot topic issues with constitutional experts. It's sponsored by Constituting America.
Well, hi, welcome to Constitutional Chats. I'm Janine Turner. I'm an actress by trade. You can check all that out at janineturner.com, but I'm also the founder and co-president of Constituting America. So welcome tonight. As I said, our hot topic is Article 2. We're breaking down the Constitution on the way to Constitution Day, September 17th. I co-host this with the oh-so-fabulous team. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Cathy Gillespie. Cathy Gillespie was a chief of staff. That means the boss, the one to go to, the it girl on the Hill in Washington, D.C. for over 20 years. She's also co-president, by the way, of Constituting America. And I like to say that it takes a right wing and a left wing to fly. And we're just this great team and we help each other fly. And I would just be flapping around if it were not for Cathy Gillespie. She's also doing this very exciting thing right now. She's been picked as one of the prestigious events, the Semi-Quincentennial Commission. They're helping to organize the celebration of our country's 250th birthday. And if you want to know when that is, it's 2026. And she's one of the 16 private citizens in all of America that was chosen to be on this commission. So we're very proud of that for her. And so Cathy Gillespie, say hello.
Hi, everybody. We're glad that you're here. And we want to thank our sponsor for tonight, Mr. Charlie Colvin. Charlie's a great friend of Constituting America and a big supporter of Constituting America's online auctions. And Charlie wanted us to remind everyone tonight that Constituting America's next auction is November 12th through the 19th. And if you have any items that you want to donate to the auction, just email us. You can email me at Cathy with a C, Cathy at constitutingamerica.org, and we'll get your items listed. So thank you, Charlie Colvin.
Yes. Hi, Charlie. Hi, Charlie. Okay, and now I'm going to introduce the oh-so-fabulous Tova Kaplan. She's just brilliant, and she's 16 years old, and she is just delightful and she runs our National Youth Advisory Council for Constituting America. She's a National Youth Advisor, and she runs it, I like to brag, like a CEO of a top 100 company. She's that with it, that amazing. She lives in Chicago. She's a 3-time winner of our We the Future contest. Please check it out. You have 1 month to get an entry in. Very exciting opportunity for kids. So she won for entrepreneurial in 8th grade, so get that. PSA, Know Your Rights, Read the Constitution. She won for PSA, and she most recently won for STEM, where she created an app, which should be up any day now. She can tell us when the app is going to be ready. And she also has something else to tell us about. There's another area of Constituting America where she is overseen, and I'm going to let her tell you about that. And, look, Tova and Dakari, they're not just here to say hello. They actually help plan the shows, put the shows together. They're very, very involved. So Tova Kaplan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Janine. So yeah, as she mentioned, we want to introduce an exciting new development at Constituting America, our brand new Constituting America book club for all ages. So we're rolling it out this month. You can find it. We launched a Facebook page. You can find it at Constituting America's Facebook page. We have a book club Facebook page, and we're starting off for our elementary school category with Camilla Can Vote. Some of our fans might remember it from a recent talk we had with the authors of the book, Mary Morgan Ketchel and Senator Blackburn. They came on the show and talked about the book. It's an amazing book for elementary schoolers of any age. So you can find more information about that on our Facebook page. We're also reading for the other age categories, middle school, high school, and adult. We're reading Miracle at Philadelphia, which is I started reading it last night, and I meant to read it for just a few minutes just to get a taste. I couldn't put it down and stayed up a little bit too late. So it's a great book. We'll be posting, what's great about this is Dakari and I are both going to be really involved in this. We're both going to read the books and be posting weekly updates and discussion questions on our Facebook page, so you can really, really get involved. And we'll be also holding Zooms to discuss the books. Again, you can find more information about that on our Facebook pages, but please check it out. We'd love to have your participation if you want to know more.
So now I'm going to introduce our special guest host tonight. Drum roll, please. Wyatt and Jonah Hensley. Look at them. Aren't they amazing? Wyatt and Jonah Hensley were our 2018 Best Middle School Song winners. And we had a wonderful trip in Washington, D.C., where they got private tours of the White House and the archives and the Capitol, and had a 45-minute Q&A session with none other than our Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts. So we had the pleasure of getting to know them then. Wyatt is 15, Wyatt Hensley, and a sophomore in high school, and Wyatt earned his Eagle Scout in January 2020. He's involved with Student Council and the Future Farmers of America. Wyatt says, one of my closest friends is my brother Jonah, who shares my interests except for acting. So Wyatt wants to be an actor. You got a great name for an actor, Wyatt Hensley. It really has screen attraction. Okay, now let's talk about Jonah. Jonah is 17 and a senior in high school. Jonah achieved his Eagle Scout in 2017, and he is a swimmer. Jonah is president of the local chapter of Future Business Leaders of America. That's cool. DECA and National Honor Society. Jonah is also a member of National Honor, you're a leader of National Honor Society, which means you're also a member of National Honor Society, Student Council, and a state degree holder for Future Farmers of America. Both Wyatt and Jonah attended our 2019 trip. We talked about that. So welcome, Jonah and Wyatt.
Thank you. Thank you for having us this evening.
Yes.
We're very excited.
Y'all look like you're in front of the Johnny Carson curtain, for those of us that are old enough to remember the Tonight Show. Did y'all ever see that?
Tonight with Johnny Carson.
Johnny Carson. He was always in front of curtains, and they would open. Well, we're thrilled to have y'all with us. You did such a great job asking questions on Tuesday, and we're thrilled that y'all are back. So welcome.
We're glad to be back.
Okay, now, we're glad you're here. Last, but certainly not least, is our constitutional expert, Professor William Morrisey. We're thrilled that he is here. And we have a photo of him. Professor Morrisey is a professor emeritus of politics at Hillsdale College, love Hillsdale, where he held the William and Patricia Lamothe Chair in the U.S. Constitution. He has a new book coming out. Oh, gosh. Yes, and I cannot wait to read this. Herman Melville's Ship of State. You know, when you say hi in just a minute, you need to tell us what that book's about. I'm very, very curious. Of course, Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick. We are so blessed to have Professor Morrisey's help over the years with Constituting America. And he's helped design many of our 90-day studies. So please check that out, our 90-day studies. They're all archived. They're fantastic. We break Federalist Papers down, Constitution down, work with the classics. It's an amazing study. And he's written, get this, over 36 essays for our studies over the years. 36. Many of them in our prestigious opening and closing essay slots. And he's also been a mentor. In one of our mentor trips, Professor Morrisey joined Constituting America winners at Mount Vernon Inn in 2015 for our Dine with the Constitutional Scholar evening. And he was brilliant as usual. His other books include Self-Government, the American Theme, Presidents of the Founding and Civil War. His second book is The Dilemma of Progressivism, How Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson Reshaped the American Regime of Self-Government. And his third book, Churchill and de Gaulle, The Geopolitics of Liberty. Well, we're thrilled to have you with us, Professor Morrisey. Back by popular demand. Everyone loves Professor Morrisey, and you're generous to spend your Saturday night with us again. So hello.
Hello, thanks for bringing me back. Now you want to
tell me about your book. Yeah.
It's a commentary on Moby Dick. So that's basically it's a complicated, long book, and this commentary is a nice short commentary. So it brings you into the book gets you oriented toward it, and you can understand it more clearly, I think, if you read it.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think I went to sleep last night watching a documentary on Herman Melville, and they were talking about Moby Dick. So that I've actually never read it. I'm sure Tova and Jonah and Wyatt have read it. Have y'all read it? Yes, they wrote. I haven't though. I was working as an actress. Okay, well, I'm thrilled that you're here, Professor Morrisey. And so we're going to talk about Article 2, Section 3 and 4 today, but we do want to do a little recap of two issues about which we were discussing last Tuesday. One is how the electors for the Electoral College, the ones who vote for the states that carry the vote forth to they actually do this vote in January in the House, I believe. They all go. And also we'll talk about the executive, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. We're going to just kind of tweak that a little bit with treaties and executive agreements and where we stand with all that, because I think executive agreements are tricky and duplicitous. They should just call it a treaty and it should be ratified by the Senate. So go ahead and let's talk about the Electoral College. We were talking last Tuesday about how they are elected. And then the process of how they really do carry the vote forward. And also, Professor Morrisey, how it was so different in the olden days. In the very beginning, and I don't know when it changed, that it wasn't by vote of the people. It was just they got together, the electors, and they literally decided. It's different now. Now electors just sort of carry forth the popular vote, you know. So go ahead and explain it all.
Okay. Well, today there are two tiers to this. First of all, the parties, the political parties, which are now well organized, they didn't even have them in 1789 during the first election. The political parties nominate the people that they are going to run as electors in the general election. Because as you know, when you vote for a candidate for president, you're not literally voting for that person. You're voting for the electors who are committed to that person, right? So for example, if you vote for a Democrat, whoever the Democratic nominee is, this time it's Biden, of course, you're not really voting for Biden, you're voting for the electors in your state who are committed to Biden. And they are nominated typically by the state party committees. So in Michigan, it would be the Michigan Party Committee. But there are other ways of doing it. There's one state that actually has the presidential nominee of the party determine who the electors are in that state. Forget which state it is, but there are different ways of doing it. So that's the first step. Okay. Now, what I was talking about the last time, what I thought you were asking me last time was how in the general election, the voters, the electors are determined. And that has changed over the years. And you were asking, you know, when did it shift from state legislatures determining that to general elections within the state? Okay. Now that has actually changed a couple of times. In 1789, the first election, when Washington was elected, two of the states hadn't ratified the Constitution. They didn't vote at all. Rhode Island and North Carolina were ineligible. New York State, which was eligible, didn't get its votes in on time because it had a split. The two houses of the New York legislature, one was controlled by anti-federalists who didn't like the Constitution at all, and the other was federalists. The governor was a famous anti-federalist named George Clinton, and they deadlocked for so long that when they finally got their act together to send in the votes, it was too late. So their votes were never counted. But the other 10 states, the ones that actually voted, 5 of them voted by popular vote, and 5 of them voted through the state legislatures for the electors. The ones that voted for unpopular vote were Pennsylvania, Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. Those are the ones that voted by popular vote for the electors. The other states.
Wait, hang on. I just want to clarify that. When you say popular vote, you're saying the people.
Yeah.
We the people actually voted.
Just the way we do now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Even for Washington, but many of them didn't.
But 5 of them didn't. So it was split half and half. Now, the next step was the parties split, right? You get John Adams, who's in the Federalist Party, and Jefferson, who is running that what becomes the Democratic Party, the Jeffersonian Democrats. And so the states, the states that were controlled by the Jeffersonians were very suspicious of the federal government, and they put they made the state legislatures the people who voted for the electors. So by 1800, with the first Jefferson election, right, when he was elected, 11 of the 13 states were actually the legislatures were voting for the electors, not the people. That was an
not in 1789. Oh, okay.
Yeah, see
Yeah.
that? And
1802 was Jefferson 1802?
1800.
Or was that Adams?
No, Adams was 1796.
Yeah. Okay.
Washington was 89 and 92. Then Adams was 96, and so he had a 1 year.
To 1801.
Yeah. So well, he was
Or to 1800. Yeah.
Yeah. The election was in 1800. The inauguration 1801.
Right.
And
Okay.
so that was that election. But then, of course,
Jefferson changed it for the parties just in his state, though, not for all of the United States, just in Virginia.
The Jeffersonian Democrats, that party changed it in 11 of the 13 states, or they changed it, or the ones
okay.
You see what I'm saying? Several of the 5 that had popular elections switched to state legislative elections of electors. See that? And so,
yeah.
Okay. So if that's clear, I hope it's clear.
Okay, but I do have another question. The electors, just so our listeners understand here, electors, Republicans have their electors and Democrats have their electors?
Sure. Today, yeah,
Okay.
You bet they do.
So let's say let's go back to Hillary Clinton and Trump. So let's say when Trump wins, the Democrat electors go as well?
No.
There are Democrat and Republican electors? Like in the part, I'm confused. I'm sorry.
Let's say the state of Texas voted, I believe, for Trump, right? The state of, so they vote, that means they elected electors that were committed to Trump. And all of those electors went to Trump, and none of them went for Clinton. Clinton won in New York, so all the electors in New York voted for Clinton, and Trump ended up with another.
Yeah, so the elector has to be honest to represent what the vote was in the state. But what I'm asking is when they are elected as like the Republicans? How many electors are there per state? And some aren't Republicans and some aren't Democrats. It's not really party affiliated, is it?
The way it's determined is it's the number of senators, so that's 100 electors. The number of representatives, that's 435, so that's 535, plus 3 from the District of Columbia, which got that right through constitutional amendment a number of years ago. So, and a majority is 270 or more. You need 270 electoral votes across the country to win, but it's a state by state thing. So New York has a lot of electors, Texas and California have a lot of electors, Rhode Island doesn't have many because it doesn't have as many representatives, House of Representative people in it as many of the other states do. So that's how Trump won without getting a majority of the popular vote. Clinton won the.
Yes, because he won the Electoral College. But I'm just still trying to figure out how these electors are elected in the first place, and it's not based on party. It's just
it is initially. But if you're let's say you're voting in Texas, you vote for one of the candidates. Let's say you vote for the Republican candidate for president. You're not voting directly for that person. You're voting for the electors who are.
No, okay, but that I understand. I'm not okay. There's the Electoral College, which means my vote will go toward the Electoral College.
Right.
I'm talking about the person that is the elector. The actual Janine Turner is the elector that's going to go to Washington, D.C. and cast the vote for the Electoral College for that state.
Right.
How is that Janine Turner, that elector, not the electoral college, the elector elected? And Kathy and I, you know,
And
it's different in every state.
Right, but you're talking about how the elector is elected through the party, and you would then be elected by one of the parties, right? Whichever party you're a member of, you would be elected by the state convention, the state Republican Party convention, the state Democratic Party convention, and you would then be sent to the Electoral College if and only if your candidate wins in the general election in your state.
Tova, your turn.
Sure. So a lot of this section is talking about the responsibilities and the role of the presidency. So how did the founding fathers differentiate the role of a president versus the role of like a monarch that they were trying to go away from in England? I was reading Miracle at Philadelphia yesterday, and they were talking a lot about how a big worry of a lot of the founding fathers, and particularly the anti-federalists, was that they didn't want to make the central state too strong to make it like England's monarchy, but a lot of other founding fathers thought that there were positive aspects of the British system that they could use. So what discussion was there of that, and how did that end up being reflected in the content of the section?
Yeah, the relevant Federalist papers that discuss all of that are numbers 67 to 77, and basically the difference between an American president and a British monarch are several. Number one, it's not a hereditary position in America. It's a Republican elected representative in America. Going through the Electoral College that we were just talking about. That's number one. Number two, the terms are limited. You get a 4-year term. Originally, you could be elected any number of times. There was no two-term limit imposed, but still it wasn't a automatic lifetime position. Second of all, the powers are quite different. The British monarch is the defender of the realm. He has complete leeway in foreign policy, including the declaration of war. Whereas as you know from the Constitution, the Congress has very considerable foreign policy powers, and it does have the capacity to declare war. Those are the main things that I would say are key. It's it's an executive, just as the monarch in England is. And it's separated out from the Congress, as it was not under the Articles, right? There was no independent branch of government. There was just the Congress, and that was it. So it's separated out. That's very much like the British system, but though it's a much more limited, much more legally limited form of executive authority.
And then was this figure of president, did this ever exist before in any form in another government, or did Americans kind of completely invent the idea of a president in the sense that they laid it out, or was it a continuation of a previous system?
It's a thoroughly Republican form of the executive, and I don't think that anyone really had that before.
That's fascinating. I really don't think we give enough credit to just, like, it's crazy. They literally invented a new form of government that was based around the rights of the people. I know, and I forget what constitutional chat we discussed this on. Maybe it was Article 1, but that, like, what makes our form of government unique is that the people give the government power. Unlike, as you were mentioning, with the monarchy, the absolute monarch gave the people power.
Yeah, that's a very important point. In England, the government, including the king, is sovereign, whereas in the United States, the people are sovereign and they elect representatives to govern them.
Right. I think
James Monroe had a short book that you could read called "The People, the Sovereigns," where he makes exactly that point.
Right. That's really interesting. And I'm just wondering, I guess we can cut our founding fathers a little bit of slack, since they were, as you mentioned, inventing an entirely new form of government position. But I find it interesting why they didn't they set term limits, but they didn't set a term limit. You know, they didn't set the,
Right.
they didn't set a maximum amount of limits, which
right.
I think would be a key distinction, a key way they could have made the position distinct from monarchy, because the system they laid out meant that if the president wanted to, they could have ruled for life. And I guess they didn't see an inherent problem in this if the people decided to keep electing them. And we got George Washington. We got so lucky our first time. We hit the jackpot and got George Washington, who was willing to step aside and set that precedent. But can you elaborate as to why you think the founding fathers didn't see a problem with the potential for our president to rule for life as long as the people kept electing him?
Well, you sort of answered your own question. If the people think he's doing a good job, why shouldn't the sovereign people be able to reelect him? The other thing is that the way we have it now means that, among other things, you've got a system whereby the president is called a lame duck the last couple of years of his term because he's not eligible for reelection. The idea is that the president will continue to energetically do his duties as president because he might very well want to run for a third term. And that option was always open up until the constitutional amendment post Franklin Roosevelt that limited it to 2 terms.
That's so interesting. I never thought about it like that. You know, the motivations of being a president, we all know, like, ambition is human nature. If you really want to appeal to the people to get elected again, you're going to generally carry out the will of the people. So I'm interested, I'm sorry, I'll give other people a chance to ask questions, but this is really interesting to me. Is there, looking back on history of the presidency, has there been, I guess probably since FDR, which was when it was officially codified that it had to be 2 terms, has there been like a noticeable difference in the behavior of presidents in the second term once they're kind of off the hook for running again? Is there like a major difference in how they act and how they treat
I think the major difference is the one that I mentioned, which is that they tend to get less authority with Congress because they're on their way out. And people start looking, as you know, and nowadays presidential elections last a minimum of a year, which means that 2 people who aren't the president are duking it out in the last year of the president's term, the second term president's term, and that distracts people. The president is kind of a bystander in his own country in a way.
You know, it's interesting that. With Tova, I think Tova, you're asking if they could be elected forever, would that change the way they behave in the second term? But you know, Professor Morrisey, I think only Cathy and I and Lisa were on this. We gave a speech to the winners of our contest, and I was teaching them how to write a petition. And then I applied the tools of petition and speech and the First Amendment and the press and the assembly and all that, how it works. So you can do that same thing with an amendment. And one of the students, and Tova, were you on? One of the students said that the amendment that he wants is that there are no longer 2 terms of 4, but only 1 term of 6 years, so that the president never has to waste the last year or 2 worrying about re-election, and you'll have a solid 6 years. And I don't know, man, I really liked that idea.
Well, then you're in favor of the constitutional amendment that limited it to 2 terms.
No, I'm in favor of a constitutional amendment. What the student was saying, a constitutional amendment that it's only 1 election, and the term instead of 4 years is 6 years. And so there's only 1 election for the president, like Virginia with the governor, I guess. He can only serve for 6 years, period. So the entire time he's in office, he's just in office, or she is just in office, and they don't have to worry about a re-election or anything. It's just 1 stretch of 6 years, which I think is totally cool. Okay, Jonah and Wyatt, go ahead, because y'all ask your questions. We are supposed to talk about 3 and 4. I don't even know if we're getting to that.
Going back to the discussion of the electors, Dr. Morrisey, I'm curious to know typically who are the electors? Are they party leaders or party members?
Yes. Yes, the answer is that they are people who are distinguished within their party. They're trusted. You want people who are going to vote the way they say they're going to vote. You don't want faithless electors, right? So yes, they're people who are trusted. It's considered a privilege and an honor to be selected as an elector, and it's a reward for loyalty to the party and work within the state party.
So can they be average day citizens as well?
Well, they can be. They can't be in the federal government. They can't be senators and they can't be House of Representatives. So in that sense, they certainly can be average citizens. But they have to be average citizens who distinguish themselves in the minds of the state party as loyalists and as people that they can trust.
Okay, thank you.
Now there's
I think he was wondering if he had to be in a political party in order to be chosen as elector.
Well,
but the answer is
would have
technically no, but it would be hard.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing is,
they who are elected to be electors but don't really become electors until their party wins. See, I'm getting it. I'm getting it. Woo-hoo.
And
okay,
one thing that I didn't get to mention because we got involved in that issue is that by 1832, Andrew Jackson's second election, right? 1832, he was elected for the second time. All of the states except South Carolina voted through popular vote. For the legislatures were taken out of it altogether, because by then the Federalists were no longer considered a threat. They were gone, basically. The Federalist Party collapsed, so it was really it was Democrats who were running anyway. So it was a popular vote on the electoral level.
Yeah. Okay, Jonah and Wyatt, how about another question? Go ahead.
Okay, so on the section 2, with my Constitution in my hand, it kind of gives a little more power to the Senate rather than the House of Representatives. Do you know why the Founding Fathers wanted the Senate to be more powerful? Because it says, with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, and then with advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers, and councils. Do you have any idea why they wanted the Senate?
The answer is that the Senate has 6-year terms and the House of Representatives have 2-year terms. So at least in the old days, there was much more turnover in the House of Representatives than there was in the Senate. The Senate had more experience in the senators would have had more experience at the national level of government. So they had more experience, and also they represented the states. So that means that a 2/3 vote for a treaty meant that the vast majority, a supermajority of the states were on board with the given treaty that they were voting for.
Yeah, very fascinating. Thank you.
Do y'all have another set of questions?
Yeah.
Why don't you ask about why don't you ask about we're in Article 2, Section 3 and 4, since that's what we're supposed to be talking about.
I do have, why did the founders allow the president to have the power to convene both houses or either one over disagreements, or just if there's any conflicts?
Well, because they want to be able to, if there's an emergency, a national emergency of any great magnitude, they want to be able to call them back into session. They don't want to be able to let them. Another thing that they could do, if you're the opposite party of the president, you could just drag your feet and not show up to do your job, right? They could just deadlock the whole thing. And so the president has the power, as you say, to do that, to convene them. He can't control their votes, but he at least can get them into Washington and make them at least try to get them to do their job.
So could this be seen more recently whenever they were having more of a conflict over the budget?
If in other words, they might be able to just try to starve the president out, right, by not voting for a budget. They can do that on specific things, even if they are in Washington. But they could just drag their feet and collapse the government.
Fascinating.
Yeah, my last question on section 3, it tells about that, quote, he shall from time to time give to the Congress information of the State of the Union. So talking about giving the State of the Union, has there ever been a president or presidents that didn't give a State of the Union, whether they had disagreements with Congress or didn't have enough time to?
Well, the only one that I don't think so. It's changed in the terms of the format, though. Many of the early presidents, up until Woodrow Wilson, submitted the State of the Union address in writing. They did not go to the Congress to give an oration. Wilson, who was a very good orator. A lot of people don't think that he would have been, because they look at him and he looks like a kind of a college professor type. So you don't think that he'd be an impressive orator, but he was. And he personally restarted the idea of delivering the address as an address to Congress. And of course, now with radio and television, it's a standard practice.
So the first president to ever deliver it, I'm sorry, Tova, the first president to ever deliver it was Woodrow Wilson in person?
I think that Jefferson might have tried, and he had a bad experience with it, so he just stopped doing it.
Well, actually,
most of them before that delivered it on a piece of paper.
What I read was that.
Go ahead, Tova.
Jefferson, the reason why he didn't want to deliver it in person is because he thought it was too similar to the monarchy, where the king would like talk directly to the Congress, or not Congress, but whatever bodies of power they had, the House of Commons, or the House. He would talk to them directly, and Jefferson thought it was too elitist, too like the monarchy. He didn't want to he didn't want to be viewed that way, so he just wrote it out and then sent it with messengers to individually the members of Congress, and then it just continued as that until Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
Okay, Cathy, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Professor Morrisey. And I'm going to go back just for a second. I know we're supposed to be doing Article 2, Section 3 and 4, but I promised 2 people I would ask this question tonight.
Right.
Patty asks, and then also my dad asked the same question. Is there anything in the Constitution that addresses how long it is allowed to wait to announce who won the presidency? And my dad went on to ask, what recourse does the public have if some states don't get their votes counted, if a winner hasn't been determined by inauguration day?
Well, the same thing would happen with that happened in New York in 1789. Their votes wouldn't count.
Interesting.
Is it stipulated? Is it stipulated in the Constitution the day it has to be declared?
No, the date is not stipulated in the Constitution, but they did have a deadline for that first election, and I assume it would work the same way.
Interesting.
But if there isn't a deadline, how can it work that way if there's no deadline?
Well, I mean, there's not a deadline in the Constitution, but that doesn't mean the Congress can't set a deadline. Right.
So
law. Now I don't know
Congress would have to.
Yeah, at some point you've got to have a new president.
But right now there is no deadline, so that'd be interesting. Cathy, go ahead. What other questions?
Well, would we want Professor Morrisey just to talk a little bit about, since we've addressed Article 3 a little bit, go ahead and talk about Article 4 and then ask some questions on that?
3 is the duties of the president. That consists, as already been mentioned, the State of the Union address, and also convening both houses or either house, right? And also they can adjourn either house if the houses disagree about the time of adjournment, right? He can do that if he wants to. They can receive ambassadors from other countries, and they, quote, take care that the laws be faithfully executed. I mentioned in the first session that basically an executor, that's the basic function of any executive, to execute the laws. And the other thing he can do is commission military officers, which is a big event in the life of any military officer to receive his commission. Now, 4 is the penalties for failing to do the duties, and that's impeachment and conviction. Impeachment is basically an indictment, right? It's not a conviction. The indictment or impeachment articles are voted on by the House of Representatives. Then the trial, which is presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, occurs in the Senate. and they vote either to convict or to acquit. The crimes are things like treason, bribery, or what they call other high crimes or misdemeanors. Now, other high crimes and misdemeanors is a phrase that's been debated quite a bit. Basically, what it seems to mean is that the failure to perform the duties that are enumerated in Section 3. So, for example, if you were, there have been judges who were impeached because they were insane. They went mad, and they were impeached on that basis. Obviously, perjury, abuse of power, obstruction of justice, all of those charges have been made against presidents who were impeached.
Super cool, and really interesting that the president is supposed to execute the laws that have been passed by the House and the Senate isn't even mentioned to the third section of Article 2. Okay, let's do lightning round. So Tova, go ahead, lightning question.
Is the impeachment process that's laid out in the Constitution very different from other processes in other countries of removing elected officials? Like, is it unique that an American president is able to be removed by Congress?
Well, of course, in many republics, they don't have a presidential system. They have a parliamentary system, which means that the party can remove there can be a vote of no confidence within the parliament. It's not a separation of powers, so you don't it's just not the same system at all. France, I'm trying to think. France has a presidential system, and I'm trying to remember how the president can be removed, and I'm just not remembering it. But it is unusual, partly because most republics are parliamentary regimes and not presidential separation of powers type regimes that we have.
Okay, I'm going to interject really quickly. So when Rome was a republic and they had their Senate, they didn't have a abiding figure?
No, the Senate ran it. That's why you get Julius Caesar eventually. It's basically a military coup.
So Julius Caesar was the first one to oversee the Senate, so to speak, and that's why he was et tu, brutade.
Yeah, overthrow the Senate, as a matter of fact, and that's why he was assassinated by senators. Yeah.
Yeah, and when they certainly in France brought Napoleon over, took away their supposed republic, and then they actually brought a king in. After Napoleon, they put a king back on, and then it was Napoleon II and all that.
There were many regime changes in France in between 1789 and 1958, when the Fifth Republic was finally established under de Gaulle.
Okay, Jonah and Wyatt.
Okay, so my question, Section 4 talks about impeachment. So I had a couple people ask about clarifications on it. So we've had three, I'm going to list presidents, Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and most recently Donald Trump, who were impeached. But when I think of impeachment, I think of both House representatives and the Senate both saying, okay, yeah, get him out of office.
No, that's a misnomer. This impeachment simply means an indictment. So if you're indicted by your local district attorney, you have not been convicted of anything. You've just been indicted, and you haven't been tried yet. The impeachment articles of impeachment are voted on by the House, and that's strictly an indictment. Then it goes to the Senate for the trial, and that would be where the conviction occurs. In the cases that you mentioned, the Senate did not vote for conviction.
So should people be more specific? Because like in all three of those scenarios with Johnson, Clinton, and Trump, they weren't impeached by the Senate, who has the sole power of impeachment.
No, the House has the sole power of impeachment. The Senate has the sole power of conviction or acquittal.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yep.
So should people be more specific of saying instead of them being impeached, they were indicted, or they were impeached by the House?
Well, the constitutional term is impeachment. So really, it's just a matter of learning what the term means.
All right.
So I think you would say they're impeached, but they were not convicted, if I'm following what Professor Morrisey is saying, because the Senate convicts. So you say they were impeached, but they were not convicted. Right. Okay, another question in your camp there?
As you said earlier, Dr. Morrisey, about that there's kind of been, there could be different interpretations on what a high crime is or misdemeanors between different people. Do you see with the kind of the vagueness of it, do you see that this could possibly be misused by Congress, possibly for political gain?
Well, sure it can. Of course it can be. There's no doubt about it, because, but so far, it really, it's what they've used it for in recent times is to kind of tie up the president, right? In other words, they get the president all wrapped up in defending himself against these impeachment charges, and then he has less room, less time, less energy to do other things that he might want to do in terms of policy. So that's been the practical effect of the impeachment process, and it's almost an attempt to not to reverse the course of the results of an election necessarily. That would be an actual conviction, but it is an attempt to hamstring the president.
Well, we've got some great listener comments here. Professor Klinger says that impeachment exists in many countries, including the UK. The precedent there was pertinent to the US, but the king could not be impeached, just civil officers. And then Professor Klinger also makes a comment that most states permit impeachment of state officers, including governors. Some, such as Texas, do not require a criminal charge as the basis for impeachment.
Right. My response to that is simply that that's true, but we were talking about the presidential powers and the presidential impeachment. So it's certainly true that other officers can be impeached, however, and he's right to say, of course, the British monarch could not be impeached.
So do you think that the states followed the example set by the Constitution in setting up impeachment processes in their own states, or were there impeachment processes in the states and so our founding fathers got the idea to put it in the Constitution? Which way did it go, do you think?
I believe that there were ways of getting rid of officers before the Constitution was ratified, because if you have somebody who is chronically not doing the job, if as I say, instances of insanity or disability of some sort, and the person still doesn't want to voluntarily just quit, you've got to have a way of removing them from office, and the states already had that.
Okay, so now I get to ask my Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 question in closing, which is about the treaty process, and that according to the Federalist Papers, a treaty is any agreement made between the president and a foreign nation. It has to come back and it has to be ratified by the Senate. And that's a wonderful check and balance, because the president can't get so powerful that he comes home and just says, this is what you're going to do now. But they changed it. And you can tell us when this changed. I'm a little confused. They started using this terminology, executive agreement, to get away from the treaty so that it didn't have to be ratified. And okay. I think that's super sneaky. And I want to know if executive agreements, not executive orders, because executive orders are in Article 2, and I think we should quickly talk about executive orders. Let's stop for a second. Executive orders are listed in Article 2. Talk about that for a second, please.
Right, and an executive order, typically it's a follow-up on some sort of congressional enactment. So in other words, or a law. You have to, a law isn't self-executing. So an executive must issue an order for some specific fill-in-the-blank type of action that needs to be taken pursuant to a law of the land.
But executive orders are used, and I think even Washington did a few that were not related to a law at all, and that's the way it is today. That's been passed by Congress.
That can be done too, but he has to do it in accordance with his enumerated powers. So, for example, I'll give you an example. This is not an executive order, but it's an executive agreement. Would be in a war. If you want to have, if the commander-in-chief agrees to have a truce in the war, he agrees to that with the foreign power. He doesn't need to go through the Senate or anyone else to do that. So basically, what these executive agreements did exist from day one in the American Constitution. It's just that they weren't used.
Now, I just want everyone to be clear. We're not talking about executive orders now anymore. We're talking about an executive agreement. But is executive agreement, the treaties are talked about and that they have to be ratified. But is the word executive agreement in the Constitution in Article 2 at all?
No, but it follows from sometimes the commander-in-chief power, right? And because of the exigencies of war, and it can also be. It was also done with international agreements. Let me give you an example. In the source of this is from the Emir de Vattel, who was the author of the Law of Nations, which was the standard textbook on international law at that time. He says that pacts dealing with matters of temporary interest, that is to say, not binding long-term agreements, are these executive agreements. Okay, so that would be like a truce in a war. That's an executive agreement between two powers. In the 50 years between 1789 and 1839, the first 50 years under the Constitution, we had 60 treaties and 27 executive agreements. Washington's 1793 Neutrality Proclamation during the European Wars was basically an executive order that had to do with foreign policy. But also there was an agreement with the Great Britain in 1817, which was the agreement that demilitarized the Great Lakes so that the US Navy and the British Navy were no longer on the Great Lakes. That was an agreement, an executive agreement that was negotiated, and it was not a treaty. It was not ratified by
These are all internal within the United States. I'm talking about foreign.
No,
like
not the other one, not the 1817 treaty. That's an international agreement between the British Empire, which ruled Canada in those days, and the United States to demilitarize the Great Lakes. Because don't forget, they just fought the War of 1812, and they'd had major military naval battles on the Great Lakes.
Right. Oh, well, who knew that? I didn't know that. Yeah.
And there were other ones later on, agreements between the US and Mexico concerning, there were Indian nations who would make raids on the United States and then retreat back to Mexico. And so they did a series of executive agreements in the 1890s so that America could do hot pursuit into Mexico.
Okay, let me interrupt you there, though. It's not in the Constitution, though. So just because Washington did it and they did it back then doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, because technically our founding fathers wanted us to, any agreement with a foreign nation had to be checked by the Senate.
Well, if that's the case,
what they say, right?
Right. Well, it doesn't have to be in the Constitution if it flows from one of the enumerated powers. And in the case of military matters, in the case of commander-in-chief, that goes with the power of being commander-in-chief to be able to set up truces and other types of things with foreign countries. Yeah.
Well, but the Iranian deal that President Obama did.
Well, that's a little bit
different. That was called an these are what I'm referring to that happen all the time now. That was considered an executive agreement, and then suddenly the House and everybody wanted to ratify it. I'm like, wait a minute, you have it in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. If they just called it for what it was, which was a treaty, it would have been ratified by the Senate anyway.
Right, and the other thing is that since 1940, America has had so much more involvement in international politics that the Senate itself doesn't want to try to ratify all these many, literally hundreds of treaties that come before the United States in any given 5-year period. So they might want to take back that power, big things, but with the smaller things, they just don't have any interest in doing so.
But see, I don't think that's right. I think that they should stick to the Constitution. They shouldn't be doing. They shouldn't be doing these. It was there for a reason.
There was an attempt in the 1950s, the Bricker Amendments, which were exactly what you're talking about. Senator Bricker from Ohio introduced the Bricker Amendment that would require exactly what you're talking about. And it was voted down. One reason was that Eisenhower was dead set against it. He said that it would basically paralyze the executive branch of the federal government at this point, given the new circumstances that America faced.
Okay, so the Bricker Amendment, that's really cool. I'm going to look that up.
He was supported by his Ohio colleague, Robert Taft. And he was also supported by Southern Democrats who were worried that treaties might erase what was then the legal segregation in the Southern states. There were all sorts of angles going on back then.
Wyatt and Jonah, I know y'all had another quick question, but you were wanting to ask it. You put your hand up. Make it super quick, though.
Okay. Yes. Talking about the executive agreements, and this can go along with executive treaties, I guess, or executive orders. Are they circumventing the other branches when they make these executive orders?
They are bypassing them, that's for sure. Now, they're bypassing them in many cases with the tacit consent of those other branches. Because, as I say, the Senate really doesn't want to have to deal with so many foreign agreements. Because we have so many of them now. We didn't used to have that many of them, right? But now that we have a much more extensive foreign policy in the past 80 years or so, it's a different story.
We want to thank one more time our sponsor, Charlie Colvin, for making this possible tonight. So Charlie, thank you.
Professor Morrisey, yeah, Saint Professor Morrisey, thank you again.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining us.